Yeah, so for search, I would say if you are a high income professional, likely you have a very busy career, maybe you have family. So the time that's available to really do one of the most foundation work in short term rental investing, which is the search phase, right? That's the foundation. You're buying the fundamental assets. That has to be right. But in order to get right that first step, it's a lot go into it. How do you know what's the right budget for your financial situation based on that's the first thing you need to figure out based on my liquidity, based on my financial profile. Can I even afford this house? And then from there, you need to find the market that actually works for you based on your situation. Where I see a lot of first time investor, they're doing is they start looking at multiple market at the same time. The learning curve was the highest because it's that 0 to 1 and there's a lot of unknown, a lot of uncertainty. You got to learn how to run models, look at numbers to estimate your cost, furnishing and design. You can get really overwhelmed very quickly.
Welcome back to STR Like the Best. I'm your host, Michael Chang. I have Elizabeth here with me today. Hey, Elizabeth. Good morning.
Hi, everyone.
We wanted to cover today a very important topic, the cost of doing it alone, the cost of doing the short-term rental journey by yourself if you've never done it before. Now, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. I'm Michael Chang, and Elizabeth and I have been running the short-term rental business since 2016, so about 10 years now. We start this podcast to share our journey, and the goal here is to help you better invest your time and money in short-term rentals. If you're brand new, or if you already have a few short-term rentals, we hope you'll find this episode helpful. And if you do, if you wouldn't mind to share this with spouse, colleague, someone that's interested in short-term rentals. If there's something that on the show that you're interested in, leave a comment, like and subscribe. We appreciate your support. We don't have any sponsors or anything for this podcast. We want to kind of keep this very open between me and Liz. So your support would be greatly appreciated. Why don't I kick this off? The cost of doing this by yourself. I think we look back to, maybe our own journey when we bought our first property. Maybe we start there. Why don't we actually start with the long-term rental? And we do it really quickly in Philly. We're going to talk about that real quick. That was actually our first property purchase together. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, that was our very first long-term rental investment. So the very beginning of our real estate journey is we weren't sure what strategy, short-term rental, long-term rental, not so much midterm rental at the time. It wasn't really a popular thing yet. So we're debating, and we even think about multifamily, fix and flip. We literally went around the sun, like all different kind of real estate strategy, and landed finally on a BRRRR strategy for long-term rental. But I would say in hindsight, was that the best investment? Probably not. It's positive cash flow. It's working. However, it took a long time to get there because we were trying to do it ourselves. In hindsight, that wasn't the right strategy for us at that time for our financial goals, what we were trying to build. So yes, that took, I would say it's a really good learning curve, but probably took a year, half, 2 year out of us really just trying to piece all the puzzles together. A lot of decision fatigue, which I would like to talk about that as well, maybe later this episode, and really just the cost of time. I think now I'm thinking back, it's the cost of time of trying to figure it all out. You think you know it all, or you can learn it all. Of course you can, but the time that actually takes to understand it, execute it, analyze it, it's a long time if you don't have a mentor or someone that's expert along the way.
Just to get some background, we bought a long-term rental in West Philadelphia, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So not the best neighborhood. It was a $50,000 row house back in 2018. We hired a service that kind of did all the work for us. We put probably like another $50K into it, and then it's been rented out for the past like 8-9 years pretty consistently. It makes $100 a month. I think it really doesn't move the needle at all. And I think the most unfortunate part is we didn't save any taxes, and it hasn't appreciated at all like that. It's a class C, class D kind of area. It's cheap. It was worth $120K, in 2018, and it's still probably worth 120K right now in 2026, and not factoring all the inflation. So on a real basis, it's come down pretty significantly. It's down probably 40% if we look at inflation adjusted dollars. The benefit was it got us started, right?
Mhm.
Liz and I just got married. You wanted to kind of get into real estate, and I was like, "Hey, I think you were a lot of decision fatigue on your part."
Not only that, I remember also it's like because we didn't know what we didn't know, we were only willing to take very small risk,
Yeah,
and hence we invested in a C neighborhood row house that's 50 grand. And at that time, now looking back, it wasn't the right financial decision for us, probably. Yeah.
but it got us
It
started though,
got
right?
us started for sure.
So I think that was the biggest thing. It got us off zero, which I think was actually the most important. The biggest value of that was, I think one was you and I, like, we bought something together. I think two is it gave you confidence to buy something. It gave us both
Yeah.
confidence to buy something, and you were leading a charge on that one. And it was like it wasn't a bad investment financially. Yeah, maybe it was actually, like, in hindsight, but you kind of always you got to start somewhere. It's never going to be the right decision the first time, or not going to be the perfect decision the first time, but at least you get started. And it gave us confidence to buy our first short-term rental in the Smoky Mountains in 2020. And here is where I'll give kind of shout out to Liz. Liz was telling me to buy the Smokies in 2018, 2019, when prices were like half of what it was. We ended up buying our first one. And I think here is, for my part, like, humility on my part. I didn't have much humility back then. I was like, I'm an investment banker. I have this, that, and the other, and then, like, overanalyze everything. I didn't listen to you. Not that I didn't believe what you said, but it was just more like I couldn't hear it. I wasn't there, like, personally, my personal kind of maturation. And it cost us, right? It cost us, but in the end, I just see that too as a cost, right? It was a cost of hubris, a cost of a lack of listening. When you're working with your spouse, despite, your experience, got to, like, listen. You got to listen, and listen with an open mind, listen with an open heart. Like, things that may seem, especially when you're working in a bank or a job where you're, like, paid to be, like, the expert, and you're like, I have to be right. When it's something new, you got to actually, like, okay, I don't know anything, and I got to listen. I came around to that, and I learned, and it's been really, really helpful for us as we, built businesses together. The costs of, like, not listening. I always term it as, like, the old Chinese man syndrome or the old man syndrome, where you're like, you get very proud. Like my dad's kind of like that. And you're just, like, very proud, and you're like, hey, I don't need to listen to anyone. I'm the man of the family, blah, blah, blah. But, like, it's not the right approach. Like, you gotta listen. It's a huge cost of not listening.
Now you're much more open minded, which is, yeah, you gotta learn, start somewhere, like you said.
I mean, look, and I think fundamentally you were right? Because numbers don't lie. When you told us to buy those places, they're like 350, and we had 550, and now they're 850. If you're wrong, got to be admit you're wrong too, right? And it's something, numbers are numbers. When someone tells you to buy something at 350 and it's 550 2 years later, like, you're like, you're wrong, and you should at least, like, learn that. You already paid the tuition, you should probably learn the lesson. I mean, that's one, just, like, fundamentally, as I think working as a couple, and then also just, I think, just more like life lesson. But STRs, right? The cost of doing it by yourself. So let's break that down a little bit. In our mentorship program, and the way we break it down is there's a search phase, there's a design phase, there's a launch phase, there's a live phase, right? So that's a good framework to start off. So like, when you're searching, like, what do you need to do? What do you need to, like, be an expert on to, like, really do it right?
Yeah, so for search, I would say if you are a high income professional, likely you have a very busy career, maybe you have family. So the time that's available to really do one of the most foundation work in short term rental investing, which is the search phase, right? That's the foundation. You're buying the fundamental assets. That has to be right. But in order to get right that first step, it's a lot go into it. How do you know what's the right budget for your financial situation? Based on that's the first thing you need to figure out. Based on my liquidity, based on my financial profile, can I even afford this house? So that needs to be figured out first, right? And then from there, you need to find the market that actually works for you based on your situation. Where I see a lot of first-time investor, that what they're doing is they start looking at multiple market at the same time. And frankly, we had that in the very beginning, we were like, maybe Texas. I heard the Tennessee is good. I heard Florida is good. And we started looking everywhere and we end up nowhere. You literally just look so confused by your own research, right? And then you get into the place that analysis paralysis very easily. Now looking back, the learning curve was the highest because it's that 0 to 1. And there's a lot of unknown and a lot of uncertainty. You got to learn how to run models, look at numbers, to estimate on your cost, furnishing, and design. And everything's new. So you can get really overwhelmed very quickly.
I agree with you, but let's maybe like pin it down to just the search part, right? So you got to know the market.
Yeah.
So is the market growing or is it contracting? Is it a good market? We get asked this question all the time. Is it a good market? Two, is it the right market for you? Right? It could be a good market for Michael Chang or Elizabeth Chang. Might not be a good market for you that's listening right now because
Yep.
maybe the price is too high, price is too low, it's too far, there's not enough infrastructure. There's a lot of different reasons. So is it the right market? Is it actually a good market? Two, if it is a good market, is it good for you? Right? I think three is once you find a good market, well then what type of property actually going to work? Who's going to help you there, right? You're not going to be in that market. You got to find a real estate agent that actually like knows what they're doing. It doesn't just do like primary rentals. Like, a lot of people will say they are expert, STR experts. I think you and I know that those are few and far between, which is why, finding the right real estate agent that can really help you there is such an important piece of the puzzle. And once you find the agent too, also like how do you work with them? Because they'll give you numbers, but are they the right numbers, right? How do you analyze them? Do you have a framework, a model that actually like looks at revenue and expenses and your financing costs? So all these things, again, like, we're listening out to you and that's the framework. That's what we use. It's taken us 10 years to like really kind of figure it out. Like what are the right markets, right? Again, who do you work with? How do you work with them? How do you analyze this stuff? Right. So those are the things that are in the search phase that I think are really, really critically important because you find the right property. And this is where people kind of mess up too. It's like, okay, well, I know how to analyze markets or properties. Okay, good. But if you're too conservative, you never buy a deal. Like we've seen people come in and are like, well, I can't make the numbers work. And then we look, it's like they've done like maybe a decent good job, but because they don't have the experience, they're so off on a lot of the expenses, or they're really off on the revenue. They're like so conservative on the revenue, so conservative on the expenses, right? So you like underweight your revenue and overinflate your expenses because you like don't really know. So you're trying to like put in a lot of buffer there. And you're like, this deal doesn't work. I'm like, well, yeah, like you're too conservative, right? So there's that. And you're also like, you're too aggressive. Like your revenue estimates is like too crazy. Like you're never going to hit these numbers. Your expenses might be fine, but if you're off on the revenue, then, it's going to be really hard for
Yeah.
you to make this work. So we've seen a lot of that. And I think that's the cost, right? That's the cost of it's not like people aren't smart. It's just like the experience.
Some think that you just never learned before. You just don't know you don't know. And I have seen also is when some agent may present you, they so call the turnkey property. It sounds amazing. It sounds perfect. I don't need to do anything, and it's already making money. It could be $1 million making 100K, and then you think, oh, that sounds like a great number, and then boom, you don't know the expense, you don't know what actually goes into it, you will be losing money, right? But then you don't know if you haven't done the analysis before, you just buy into the straight turnkey
Yeah.
aspect of it, right? So that could be a high cost mistake as well.
It's a huge mistake. And, look, I mean, there are great real estate agents out there when we work with a lot of great ones. One thing is real estate agents are paid for the transaction, like they're paid for you to transact. Again, there are a lot of great ones out there, but you want to just make sure that you have an unbiased, a second opinion to make sure that what you're being presented, what you're seeing actually reflects, I don't want to say reality, but reflects a finer point there versus like just like this very broad range. Because we've seen a lot of those that like candidly we would never accept as good analysis. So that's the search phase. Let's go to the contract phase, right? So for our clients, right, we help them identify a good market based on their specific needs. Right agent, we've done the analysis during contract now. So like in that 1 month phase, what's the cost of inexperience there?
The first thing after on the contract, right? Typically, you have to go through an inspection phase, and there are just some key major item you want to look for. It's hard to catch everything, but the big item you definitely want to kind of know and make sure you catch as many as you can up front. So you're not buying a deal that's going to cost you even more to fix later on, like the roof, for example, the leaking, all that stuff can happen. So inspection, I think, is a big part. And then during this phase, you also need to think about all the financing is a huge part too. How do I close this deal? What type of financing is available to me based on my credit profile? Which you probably can speak more about it. Where do you see where people kind of make the wrong move? But I think financing is a huge part, lining up all your documents, make sure you have a great lender who really understand the STR, how investment, how it works, finding your insurance, but the right short-term rental insurance. Do you layer on the additional liability coverage, right? All of those stuff, all of those need to be covered. And where I see a lot of people miss is they have the wrong insurance on their property and they don't even know it,
Yeah.
which is a pretty common thing for short-term rental.
Very, very common.
Then it comes hiring the right short-term rental designer, have that in place. That designer, you have the great asset. Okay, I bought the perfect property. I know it's gonna make 200K based on my analysis. But how do you get to that 200K? You need the right short-term rental designer. It's super competitive these days now. You need to hire the right designer, not primary home designer, but a short-term rental designer. It's a very different thing because they're look at it from the investment ROI perspective, not personal use perspective. So
Exactly.
that's very different as well. And that will unlock that 200K revenue potential.
Yeah.
Just think about how do you create your product that's your storefront. That's how I think about it.
And that's a point where, another part of not listening to you on design and not investing in design up front. I mean, like, I think to be candid, like maybe in the beginning, like we needed to do it, but I think now, like you need to make sure that like your product. So, so we call our program, we call this actually like STR like the best. And our mentorship program where we advise
Mhm.
clients, it's STR like the best, and also the name of the podcast. And the reason that we named it that was like now to be successful in short-term rentals, like you got to be the best, right? You want to be the top, you know, 10, 15, 20% of your market. Like that's where you can make the money. If you're like an average property, it's going to be really, really hard to do. And that's what we, as we work with our clients and we counsel them is that perfection, that the right market, right property, like to your point, the right design. And we invested it in the right design. Like we just bought a property in Tennessee. We're spending $250,000 on the design and setup. Now it's a very big property. It's a 8 bedroom, 6,000 square feet, a lot going in there. Not everyone has to spend that kind of money, but we're really investing in that part. Lender, right? The right STR lender. We've seen a lot of situations where you go to a big bank, they don't really understand this, a short-term rental, and there's just a lot of brain damage that happens kind of towards the end of the process where everything kind of looks fine, and then the end they're like, oh, I need this document, that document, this insurance is wrong. Oh, we actually need you to put more money down in the deal. Chase did that to us actually. When we bought our property, they came to us and said, oh, hey, actually, instead of 20% down, we need 25% down, like the last week. Cool, thanks guys. And maybe a more rate, more points. So again, there's just like you want to find the right lender that is not going to jerk you at the end, and that happens, and it happens a lot. The other part is you want to make that time really productive, right? A lot of people, like get an inspection, they're kind of done. They're not doing the work that you need to do to get your short-term rental up and running. We call it for me, unless we call it our day one plan. The day after we close, what is our plan? And we want to do everything we can to make sure we have all the pieces in place. Your designer, your team underground, handyman, cleaner, your technology. Make sure as much of that is done up front so that you waste as little time as possible once you close. Because once you close, your mortgage starts, your insurance starts, electricity, all that stuff. And the faster you can get to revenue, the faster you get up and running and have money coming in, the lower your holding costs will be. So that's really the kind of goal of that. So let's go to launch phase. Now, Now, what's the cost of inaction when you're in launch, right? So I'll start here a little bit. Part of that cost is, if you weren't like in that, you didn't do the work in the contract phase properly, like we just talked about, right? You didn't set your team up, you didn't have the right designer, all those things, and now you wait until after you close, and then all that starts, and you're wasting time. The one thing I want to highlight there is, that between launch and live phase, what we call it, is like when you close and when you go live, you want to try to minimize that time as much as possible. You can't be perfect. You're not gonna always hit your high season, but like what you can control is like minimizing that time, and it comes with preparation. If you mess it up, it could just cost you another week, a week, a month. Like that's time or it's money that you're just wasting. And I think that's where I see a lot of people make a mistake.
Yeah, and then that can tie back to the cost of doing yourself, right? And I see where people trip here is the design. If they do it themselves, they think, oh, design it should be easy. I like design. I can do it myself. What they don't realize is everything, all the other prep work they need to do is very time consuming during under contract. They end up having very little time to really make design decisions. And there are hundreds of design decisions you need to make. Instead of 2 weeks from hiring a designer to finalize your design, now it take you 4 weeks to do it on your own. And it might not be even looking cohesive enough to be a short-term rental. And you start having a lot of decision fatigue. What color should be my pillowcase? What would go with this black lamp or couch? All those little decisions start clouding your decision making, and that's super exhausting. And by the time you close, your everything is backlog, and
Yeah.
you still need to order your furniture. That takes 2-3 weeks to arrive, and then that costs every month the mortgage. A lot of people don't account that into the cost structure. They think they're saving money while not hiring a designer. End up they actually losing money from launching the place a month earlier and not paying that extra month of mortgage.
And making the revenue
Yeah.
during that month too, right? So time is, and I think this is, you highlight a great point. It's like time is money. Your bandwidth, you have to think through that. And I think that's a lot where like, we do really well is just because like we're in that zone of we have a lot of other responsibilities. We have two young kids. Our kids are like 4.5 and 2.5. We have, and at least we're working together. So, like we can tag team a lot of this stuff. But if you and your spouse both work full time, like you don't have that much time. Like you really want to, you just got to be like super efficient in the way that you approach this if you're going to do it yourself. And if you are going to do it yourself, like hire help. Like you need to hire help, designer, people to help you set up, because the more time that you waste or the more time that you're spending making decisions that you might think are really important, but if you have a little more experience, you're kind of like, maybe this wasn't as important as I thought it was, right? And that comes with experience. It's like what actually is important, what actually are like high leverage decisions versus things that are like
Mhm.
whatever, no big deal. If I get it wrong, like I can just I can easily fix that mistake. Now, I think this is the one that a lot of people miss is the live phase, right? So when you go live and the mistakes there, like the cost of doing it yourself. I think the biggest part that I see, and we see with our clients where they're buying a short-term rental or they're buying a property and it's already a short-term rental, and all the question is like, why is this person selling? Like it's STR, why aren't they selling? And then we're like, well, it's a good market, it's a good property. There's a lot you can do with it. And then you look at it like, oh, you can improve, A, B, C, and D. It's like, okay, why didn't that person do that? Maybe they didn't know, maybe they didn't have the money. Okay, I think that's a pretty reasonable. But a lot of it's just like they just don't know how to do it properly, right? You see a
A
low
lot. Yeah.
occupancy rate. You see a lot of that, right? Like maybe you just can't. Maybe they don't know what they're doing, and it takes time to, it takes the right setup to do this properly.
100%. And then the launch to live phase, a lot of time is like, if you do it yourself, you gotta know how to get your marketing right. Because once it's live, you're playing the marketing arena. It's not the same as it's a real estate investment. However, once you're live, you're running a hospitality business, which is completely two different things. So you got to nail down your listing from the marketing perspective. And that comes from your photo, your staging, how you capture your experience, the title, the listing, how you present it. And also your pricing, promotional, seasonality, everything need to work at a very high level. And if you and revenue management is probably one of the biggest part I see people try to do themselves during the life phase, and they want to kill themselves in one way because they trying to figure out on their own. I'm talking about us year one basically,
Yeah, I know,
trying to
man.
learn every day. I was like, I don't understand why it's not getting booked, and then drop price too aggressively or raising price too high, too early, too late, and we start having all this like panic moments. So I think that's one part people don't realize how important a professional, how valuable it can be when it comes to running a short-term rental business.
Revenue management is one of those things where, so revenue management for folks, what that means is how do you price your property? And it's not just how you price your property, but how do you, there's a strategy behind that. Like, do you price higher? You obviously price higher when it's higher demand days like weekends and lower for weekdays, but there's ways to price things and your minimum night stays, which basically means like you can only book, like for example, if you're a Wednesday is hard to book, but if you have a strategy where you can get someone that wants to book maybe Thursday, Friday, and Saturday to also take your Wednesday, that's really, really powerful because you're paying for that day anyways. Your mortgage, everything is still the same. So that's revenue management in a nutshell. It's like the right pricing, but also making sure that you're trying to get as much occupancy as you can. And it's really hard, actually.
It's so
There's
hard.
there's tools like Price Labs and Beyond. They're great, but they're tools. So they're not, it's not the strategy. It's like, what's the actual thinking behind it? That's another kind of key piece that I think a lot of people miss is, they kind of do everything right, but they can't manage their revenue right. And that's, and we made that mistake for the first 2 years, actually, until we hired someone to do it professionally for us. And now that person's full time on our team. So look, I think we just wanted to kind of highlight the key points from our experience on, I think first off, more philosophically, just like listening, no one knows everything. Even with AI, like you don't know everything. AI is wrong a lot. It's really kind of how you prompt it. Like you don't know everything. You gotta keep it open mind. Two is listen to your spouse, especially when they're right. Something goes, 70% of the year, like you're probably wrong. They're probably right. And three, as we kind of listed out the four phases of the short-term rental investment process, your search phase, when you're in contract, when you close the property, so your launch phase, and then when you go live. There are four distinct chapters in that journey. If you're listening, you're obviously doing your research, you're smart, right? But there's a lot that kind of goes into it and doing it right. And I know, look, you want to get the tax benefit, of course, like I do too. We bought one this year. We're buying another one this year because we want to reduce our taxes and invest in real estate. But there is a real cost of kind of doing it yourself in terms of time, money, brain damage. We wanted to highlight some of these things, these like very common pitfalls that we see, and want to make sure that you don't, if you're listening, that you're aware of that, and you're mindful of that as you undertake this investment journey. I think for us, like being able to help our clients do this, it's been really gratifying. When I met some of them in San Francisco when I was there last week. We're meeting our students that are here in the East Coast in New York on the 12th in Midtown. Just kind of seeing like the impact was like very, very gratifying personally.
It is. I mean,
Seeing
it's just
people in
so
real life. Yeah.
yeah, and then to see their sparks in their eyes when they talk about how proud they are with their investment, how it has changed their investing journey, and then how even changed their financial picture overall. It's just really cool to see the excitement that comes into this community, and I think that kind of is the one of the major reason keep us going too, right? It's pretty powerful when you bring these people together.
I agree with all that. The one thing I should didn't tell you, they've kind of talked about their experience publicly, so I'll say it. Like Ashish and Shmita, they Ashish texted me actually, and he was like, "Oh, one thing I didn't mention was like it brought him and Shmita closer, him and his wife closer. They have something they can they can work on like outside of just like family stuff, work, because you're kind of like running in parallel. You're running in parallel a lot of times, like." You have a job, your spouse has a job, you're dealing with the kids, but you're kind of like everyone's kind of running their own lane. It's something that you can do together that is obviously going to be very impactful it's a big financial decision, and impactful to your family. And doing something together is with your spouse, something meaningful together, is rare. And it's nice to see them kind of see people kind of be able to enjoy what you and I have, right? Like, we've been working together for 10 years. Like, a lot of people are like, I don't know how you do that. And I'm like, well, I'm very patient with Liz. So, I'm,
Sure.
of
Of course you are.
course.
You gotta go through the bump and bruises. Eventually you get there.
You do, you do. No, but all joking aside, that was a really nice message to get, to be able to see that in people's lives, and people bring your kids to our meetups and everything. It's cool to see, like, it really is. Fundamentally, we're all just trying to, like, we all want to do well financially, but leaving a legacy for our kids, both from a financial perspective, but also the thinking, that
Mhm.
entrepreneurship, like, not just like starting a business, but just like learning how to think for yourself, learning how to solve problems, right? All those kind of very valuable skills that our kids will, kind of be a part of from us, learning from us, and as they get older and help us out with the business. So
100%. I'm excited.
yeah, yeah. Well, we're after Liz gets off this podcast, she has a lot of work to do for the design side. You're going down to Tennessee in like 2 weeks to get everything to finalize everything. So to see all your hard work in real life too.
Yeah, I haven't seen the property in person. You have, I haven't. So I'm
Yeah,
super excited.
it's cool. It'll be fun.
I'll share
Oh,
some content on social media.
exactly. So, folks, if you enjoyed this episode, please, again, like, subscribe, follow Liz on Instagram. She started her Instagram account sharing her journey. It's Liz. What's your Instagram? So, do
It's Liz Chan Official. That's the handle.
you want
So
to
give
spell
me
it
a
out?
follow.
Do you want to spell it out?
Yeah, LIZCHANG Official. I
Okay.
think everyone know how to spell it.
Okay, perfect. Well, guys, follow Liz on Instagram, and send her a message. Say like you heard it on the podcast, and took a lot for me to get you on these podcasts now, and now you're a natural on these now.
Yeah, it kind of just threw me in there. I was like, all right, let me try it.
You can do it. You can do it. You can do anything. Right now, it's cool. It's
Thank
it's
you.
cool. It's cool. It's a cool experience to do stuff with your significant other. So, folks, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and leave some comments if you liked it, or if you didn't like it, or if there's a topic you'd like us to cover. Till next time, thank you for listening to this episode, and we'll see you soon.